The Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar in 46 BC, was a reform of the Roman calendar. It took effect in 45 BC, shortly after the Roman conquest of Egypt. It was the predominant calendar in the Roman world, most of Europe, and in European settlements in the Americas and elsewhere, until it was refined and gradually replaced by the Gregorian calendar, promulgated in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII. The Julian calendar gains against the mean tropical year at the rate of 1 day in 128 years. For the Gregorian, the figure is 1 day in 3,226 years. The difference in the average length of the year between Julian and Gregorian is 0.002%. The Julian calendar has a regular year of 365 days divided into 12 months, as listed in Table of Months. A leap day is added to February every 4 years. The Julian year is, therefore, on average 365.25 days long. It was intended to approximate the tropical year, although Greek astronomers had known, at least since Hipparchus, a century before the Julian reform, that the tropical year was a few minutes shorter than 365.25 days. The calendar did not compensate for this difference. As a result, the year gained about 3 days every 4 centuries compared to observed equinox times and the seasons. This discrepancy was corrected by the Gregorian reform of 1582. The Gregorian calendar has the same months and month lengths as the Julian calendar, but, in the Gregorian calendar, years evenly divisible by 100 are not leap years, except that years evenly divisible by 400 remain leap years. Consequently, the Julian calendar is currently 13 days behind the Gregorian calendar. The Julian calendar has been replaced as the civil calendar by the Gregorian calendar in almost all countries which formerly used it, although it continued to be the civil calendar of some countries into the 20th century. Egypt converted on the 20th of December 1874 over 1 January 1875. Turkey switched on the 16th of February, the 1st of March 1917. Russia changed on 14th February 1918. The original proposal had been to drop 24 hours every year, spreading the change over 13 years, and to drop the leap day in years exactly divisible by 128. Greece made the change for civil purposes on the 16th of February, the 1st of March 1923. The National Day, which was a religious holiday, was to remain on the old calendar. However, this created confusion, and on 23 March 1924 the Church began using this new or political calendar for fixed religious feasts. 7 leap days are omitted in 900 years. This caused Easter, for which the calculation was unaffected, to fall in April or May. Most Christian denominations in the Western areas evangelized by Western churches have also replaced the Julian calendar with the Gregorian as the basis for the liturgical calendars. However, most branches of the Eastern Orthodox Church still use the Julian calendar for calculating the dates of movable feasts, including Easter. Some Orthodox churches have adopted the revised Julian calendar for the observance of fixed feasts, while other Orthodox churches retain the Julian calendar for all purposes. The Julian calendar is still used by the Berber people of North Africa, and on Mount Athos, in the form of the Alexandrian calendar. It is the basis for the Ethiopian calendar, which is the civil calendar of Ethiopia. During the changeover between calendars and for some time afterwards, dual dating was used in documents and gave both old-style and new-style dates. Table of Months. Motivation. The ordinary year in the previous Roman calendar consisted of 12 months, for a total of 355 days. In addition, a 28-day intercalary month, the mensis intercalaris, was sometimes inserted between February and March. This intercalary month was formed by inserting 22 or 23 days after the first 23 days of February. The last 5 days of February, which counted down toward the start of March, became the last 5 days of intercalaris. The net effect was to add 22 or 23 days to the year, forming an intercalary year of 377 of 378 days. Some say the mensis intercalaris always had 27 days and began on either the first or the second day after the terminalia, according to the later writers Censorinus and Macrobius. The ideal intercalary cycle consisted of ordinary years of 355 days alternating with intercalary years, alternately 377 and 378 days long. In this system, the average Roman year would have had 366 and a quarter days over 4 years, giving it an average drift of 1 day per year relative to any solstice or equinox. Macrobius describes a further refinement whereby, in one 8-year period within a 24-year cycle, there were only 3 intercalary years, each of 377 days. This refinement averages the length of the year to 365.25 days over 24 years. In practice, intercalations did not occur systematically according to any of these ideal systems, but were determined by the pontifices. So far as can be determined from the historical evidence, they were much less regular than these ideal schemes suggest. They usually occurred every second or third year, but were sometimes omitted for much longer, and occasionally occurred in 2 consecutive years. If managed correctly, this system could have allowed the Roman year to stay roughly aligned to a tropical year. However, since the pontifices were often politicians, and because a Roman magistrate's term of office corresponded with a calendar year, this power was prone to abuse. A pontifex could lengthen a year in which one of his political allies was in office, or refuse to lengthen one in which his opponents were in power. If too many intercalations were omitted, as happened after the Second Punic War and during the civil wars, the calendar would drift out of alignment with the tropical year. Moreover, because intercalations were often determined quite late, the average Roman citizen often did not know the date, particularly if he or she was some distance from the city. For these reasons, the last years of the pre-Julian calendar were later known as years of confusion. The problems became particularly acute during the years of Julius Caesar's pontificate before the Reform, 63–46 BC, when there were only 5 intercalary months, none of which were during the 5 Roman years before 46 BC. Caesar's reform was intended to solve this problem permanently, by creating a calendar that remained aligned to the sun without any human intervention. This proved useful very soon after the new calendar came into effect. Varro used it in 37 BC to fix calendar dates for the start of the 4 seasons, which would have been impossible only 8 years earlier. A century later, when Pliny dated the winter solstice to the 25th of December because the sun entered the 8th degree of Capricorn on the date, this stability had become an ordinary fact of life. Context of the reform. The approximation of 365 and a quarter days for the tropical year had been known for a long time but was not used directly since ancient calendars were not solar. Although the Egyptian calendar and Iranian calendar did come very close with unadjusted years of 365 days, the Octaeteries, a cycle of 8 lunar years popularized by Cleostratus which was used in some early Greek calendars, notably in Athens, is 1.53 days longer than 8 Julian years. The length of 19 years in the cycle of Meton was 6,940 days, 6 hours longer than the mean Julian year. The mean Julian year was the basis of the 76-year cycle devised by Callippus to improve the Metonic cycle. In Persia, after the reform in the Persian calendar by introduction of the Persian Zoroastrian calendar in 503 BC and afterwards, the first day of the year slipped against the vernal equinox at the rate of approximately 1 day every 4 years. Likewise in Egypt, a fixed year of 365 days was in use, drifting by 1 day against the sun in 4 years. An unsuccessful attempt to add an extra day every 4th year was made in 238 BC. Caesar probably experienced this wandering or vague calendar in that country. He landed in the Nile Delta in October 48 BC and soon became embroiled in the Ptolemaic dynastic war, especially after Cleopatra managed to be introduced to him in Alexandria. Caesar imposed a peace, and a banquet was held to celebrate the event. Lucan depicted Caesar talking to a wise man called Icarius during the feast, stating his intention to create a calendar more perfect than that of Eudoxus. But the war soon resumed and Caesar was attacked by the Egyptian army for several months until he achieved victory. He then enjoyed a long cruise on the Nile with Cleopatra before leaving the country in June 47 BC. Caesar returned to Rome in 46 BC and, according to Plutarch, called in the best philosophers and mathematicians of his time to solve the problem of the calendar. Pliny says that Caesar was aided in his reform by the astronomer Sosigenes of Alexandria, who was generally considered the principal designer of the reform. Sosigenes may also have been the author of the astronomical almanac published by Caesar to facilitate the reform. Eventually, it was decided to establish a calendar that would be a combination between the old Roman months, the fixed length of the Egyptian calendar, and the 365 1/4 days of the Greek astronomy. According to Macrobius, Caesar was assisted in this by a certain Marcus Flavius. Julian reform. Realignment of the year. The first step of the reform was to realign the start of the calendar year to the tropical year by making 46 BC 445 days long, compensating for the intercalations which had been missed during Caesar's pontificate. This year had already been extended from 355 to 378 days by the insertion of a regular intercalary month in February, when Caesar decreed the reform, probably shortly after his return from the African campaign in late Quintillus. He added 67 more days by inserting 2 extraordinary intercalary months between November and December. These months are called intercalaris prior and intercalaris posterior in letters of Cicero written at the time. There is no basis for the statement, sometimes seen, that they were called undecember and duodecember. Their individual lengths are unknown, as is the position of the nona and ides within them, because 46 BC was the last of a series of irregular years. This extra long year was, and is, referred to as the last year of confusion. The new calendar began operation after the realignment had been completed in 45 BC. Changes to the months. The Julian months were formed by adding 10 days to a regular pre-Julian Roman year of 355 days, creating a regular Julian year of 365 days. 2 extra days were added to January, Sextilis, and December, and 1 extra day was added to April, June, September, and November. February was not changed in ordinary years, and so continued to be the traditional 28 days. Thus, the ordinary lengths of all of the months were set by the Julian calendar to the same values they still hold today. The Julian reform did not change the method used to account days of the month in the pre-Julian calendar, based on the calends, nona and ides, nor did it change the positions of these three dates within the months. Macrobius states that the extra days were added immediately before the last day of each month to avoid disturbing the position of the established religious ceremonies relative to the nona and ides of the month. However, since Roman dates after the ides of the month counted down toward the start of the next month, the extra days had the effect of raising the initial value of the count of the day following the ides in the lengthened months. Thus, in January, Sextilis, and December the 14th day of the month became A.D. 19 Cal instead of A.D. 17 Cal, while in April, June, September and November it became A.D. 18 Cal. Romans of the time born after the ides of a month responded differently to the effect of this change on the birthdays. Mark Antony kept his birthday on the 14th of January, which changed its date from A.D. 17 Cal. Feb to A.D. 19 Cal. Feb, a date that had previously not existed. Livia kept the date of her birthday unchanged at A.D. 3 Cal. Feb, which moved it from 28 to the 30th of January, a day that had previously not existed. Augustus kept his on the 23rd of September, but both the old date and the new were celebrated in some places. The inserted days were all initially characterized as dies fasti. The character of a few festival days was changed. In the early Julio-Claudian period, a large number of festivals were decreed to celebrate events of dynastic importance, which caused the character of the associated dates to be changed to NP. However, this practice was discontinued around the reign of Claudius, and the practice of characterizing days fell into disuse around the end of the 1st century AD. The Antonine jurist Gaius speaks of dies nefasti as a thing of the past. Intercalation. The old intercalary month was abolished. The new leap day was dated as ante diem bis sextum calendars martius, usually abbreviated as A.D. bis vi Cal. Mart. Hence it is called in English the bisextile day. The year in which it occurred was termed annus bissextus, in English the bissextile year. There is debate about the exact position of the bissextile day in the early Julian calendar. The earliest direct evidence is a statement of the 2nd century jurist Celsus, who states that there were two halves of a 48-hour day, and that the intercalated day was the posterior half. An inscription from AD 168 states that A.D. v Cal. Mart was the day after the bissextile day. The 19th century chronologist Idler argued that Celsus used the term posterior in a technical fashion to refer to the earlier of the 2 days, which requires the inscription to refer to the whole 48-hour day as the bissextile. Some later historians share this view. Others, following Mommsen, take the view that Celsus was using the ordinary Latin meaning of posterior. A third view is that neither half of the 48-hour bissextum was originally formally designated as intercalated, but that the need to do so arose as the concept of a 48-hour day became obsolete. There is no doubt that the bissextile day eventually became the earlier of the 2 days for most purposes. In 238 Censorinus stated that it was inserted after the terminalia and was followed by the last 5 days of February, i.e.A.D. vi v iv 3 and pred. Cal. Mart. Hence he regarded the bisextum as the first half of the double day. All later writers, including Macrobius about 430, Bede in 725, and other medieval computists followed this rule, as does the liturgical calendar of the Roman Catholic Church. However, Celsus's definition continued to be used for legal purposes. It was incorporated into Justinian's Digest, and in the English Statuta Annoae die Bissextili of 1236, which was not formally repealed until 1879. The effect of the bisextile day on the nundinal cycle is not discussed in the sources. According to Dio Cassius, a leap day was inserted in 41 BC to ensure that the first market day of 40 BC did not fall on the 1st of January, which implies that the old 8-day cycle was not immediately affected by the Julian reform. However, he also reports that in AD 44, and on some previous occasions, the market day was changed to avoid a conflict with a religious festival. This may indicate that a single nundinal letter was assigned to both halves of the 48-hour bisextile day by this time, so that the Redifugiem and the market day might fall on the same date but on different days. In any case, the 8-day nundinal cycle began to be displaced by the 7-day week in the 1st century AD, and dominical letters began to appear alongside nundinal letters in the fasti. During the late Middle Ages, days in the month came to be numbered in consecutive day order. Consequently, the leap day was considered to be the last day in February in leap years, i.e. the 29th of February, which is its current position. Sacrobosco's theory on month lengths. The Julian reform set the lengths of the months to the modern values. However, a 13th-century scholar, Sacrobosco, proposed a different explanation for the lengths of Julian months, which is still widely repeated but is certainly wrong. According to Sacrobosco, the month lengths for ordinary years in the Roman Republican calendar, from January to December, were 30, 29, 30, 29, 30, 29, 30, 29, 30, 29, 30, 29. Sacrobosco then thought that Julius Caesar added one day to every month except February, a total of 11 more days to regular months, giving the ordinary Julian year of 365 days. A single leap day could now be added to this extra short February. 31, 29, 30th, 31, 30, 31, 30, 31, 30, 31, 30, 31, 30. He then said Augustus changed this by taking one day from February to add it to Sextilis, and then modifying the alternation of the following months to 31, 28, 29, 31, 30, 31, 30, 31, 31, 30, 31, 30, 31, so that the length of Augustus would not be shorter than the length of Lulius, giving us the irregular month lengths which are still in use. There is abundant evidence disproving this theory. First, a wall painting of a Roman calendar predating the Julian reform has survived, which confirms the literary accounts that the months were already irregular before Julius Caesar reformed them, with an ordinary year of 355 days, not 354, with month lengths arranged as 29, 28, 31, 29, 31, 29, 31, 29, 29, 31, 29, 29. Also, the Julian reform did not change the dates of the Nona and Ides. In particular, the Ides were late in March, May, July and October, showing that these months always had 31 days in the Roman calendar, whereas Sacrobosco's theory requires that March, May and July were originally 30 days long and that the length of October was changed from 29 to 30 days by Caesar and to 31 days by Augustus. Further, Sacrobosco's theory is explicitly contradicted by the 3rd and 5th century authors Censorinus and Macrobius, and it is inconsistent with seasonal lengths given by Varro, writing in 37 BC, before Sextilis was renamed for Augustus in 08 BC, with the 31-day Sextilis given by an Egyptian papyrus from 24 BC, and with the 28-day February shown in the Fasti Keretani, which is dated before 12 BC. Adoption of the Julian calendar. Caesar's reform only applied to the Roman calendar. However, in the following decades many of the local civic and provincial calendars of the empire and neighboring client kingdoms were aligned to the Julian calendar by transforming them into calendars with years of 365 days with an extra day intercalated every 4 years. The reformed calendars typically retained many features of the unreformed calendars. In many cases, the new year was not on the 1st of January. The leap day was not on the bissextile day. The old month names were retained. The lengths of the reformed months did not match the lengths of Julian months, and, even if they did, the first days did not match the first day of the corresponding Julian month. Nevertheless, since the reformed calendars had fixed relationships to each other and to the Julian calendar, the process of converting dates between them became quite straightforward through the use of conversion tables known as hemorrhagia. Several of the reformed calendars are only known through surviving hemorrhagia. The 3 most important of these calendars are the Alexandrian calendar, the Asian calendar, and the Syro-Macedonian calendar. Other reformed calendars are known from Cappadocia, Cyprus, and the cities of Syria and Palestine. Most reformed calendars were adopted under Augustus, though the calendar of Nabatea was reformed after the kingdom became the Roman province of Arabia in AD 106. There is no evidence that local calendars were aligned to the Julian calendar in the Western Empire. Unreformed calendars continued to be used in Gaul, Greece, Macedon, the Balkans, and parts of Palestine, most notably in Judea. The Alexandrian calendar adapted the Egyptian calendar by adding a 6th epagomenal day as the last day of the year in every 4th year, falling on the 29th of August preceding a Julian bissextile day. It was otherwise identical to the Egyptian calendar. The first leap day was in 22 BC, and they occurred every 4 years from the beginning, even though Roman leap days occurred every 3 years at this time. This calendar influenced the structure of several other reformed calendars, such as those of the cities of Gaza and Ascalon in Palestine, Salamis in Cyprus, and the province of Arabia. It was adopted by the Coptic Church and remains in use both as the liturgical calendar of the Coptic Church and as the civil calendar of Ethiopia. The Asian calendar was an adaptation of the Macedonian calendar used in the province of Asia and, with minor variations, in nearby cities and provinces. It is known in detail through the survival of decrees promulgating it issued in 08 BC by the proconsul Paulus Fabius Maximus. It renamed the first month Dios as Caesar, and arranged the months such that each month started on the 9th day before the calends of the corresponding Roman month. Thus the year began on the 23rd of September, Augustus's birthday. Since Greek months typically had 29 of 30 days, the extra day of 31-day months was named Sabasta, the emperor's day, and was the first day of these months. The leap day was a second Sabast day in the month of Xanthikos i.e. the 24th of February. This calendar remained in use at least until the middle of the 5th century AD. The Syro-Macedonian calendar was an adaptation of the Macedonian calendar used in Antioch and other parts of Syria. The months were exactly aligned to the Julian calendar, but they retained the Macedonian names, and the year began in Dios equals November until the 5th century, when the start of the year was moved to Gorpyrios equals September. These reformed calendars generally remained in use until the 5th or 6th century. Around that time most of them were replaced as civil calendars by the Julian calendar, but with the year starting in September to reflect the year of the indiction cycle. The Julian calendar spread beyond the borders of the Roman Empire through its use as the Christian liturgical calendar. When a people or a country was converted to Christianity, they generally also adopted the Christian calendar of the church responsible for conversion. Thus, Christian Nubia and Ethiopia adopted the Alexandrian calendar, while Christian Europe adopted the Julian calendar, in either the Catholic or Orthodox variant. Starting in the 16th century, European settlements in the Americas and elsewhere likewise inherited the Julian calendar of the mother country, until they adopted the Gregorian reform. The last country to adopt the Julian calendar was the Ottoman Empire, which used it for financial purposes for some time under the name Rumi calendar and dropped the escape years which tied it to Muslim chronology. In 1840,